Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a minute at 1 p.m. Thanks for joining us early. All right. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. Welcome to today's Fireside Chat as part of the Save on Energy Management Community Initiative. This initiative is all about supporting the development of a community of practice among Ontario energy managers, including access to monthly discussion groups, an online forum through the Energy Management Learning Platform, and other initiatives. And the goal of these fireside chats is to provide an opportunity for members of the community, such as yourselves, to share some of the great work that is being done and allow others to ask questions and have a conversation about that, kind of a bit like a live case study. So we do want this to be interactive. So if you have a question, don't save it to the end. Raise your hand or type it in the chat or Q&A, and we'll get to that. I'll work that into the conversation as we go. All right, so a couple of months ago, Landmark Cinemas won an Energy Management Excellence Award from Save on Energy, recognizing the great work that they've been doing. And at the awards event, Tony Campbell from Landmark Cinemas participated in one of the panel discussions where he talked briefly in there about a projector retrofit project. And it sounded like a really cool project, and I wanted to dive into it a little bit deeper. So today, I'm excited to have Tony with us to talk a bit more about laser projectors. Thank you for joining us, Tony.
Thanks a lot, Jay. Happy to be here.
Great. Before we get to the projector project, your official title, I believe, is Director of Theater Experience. Can you tell us a bit about your role and how that plays into energy management at Landmark?
Okay, so for Landmark Cinemas, the Director of Experience is realistically the Director of Facilities at most companies. So my role encompasses projection and sound technology, building envelope, so HVAC, plumbing, mechanical systems, lighting, all of the building maintenance. And then it also encompasses all of the equipment and engineering. So all of our concession equipment, any refit project, things like that, capital management. Basically, my group kind of is the catch-all for everything. And I also am the in charge of ESG for North America in the company. So I look after our environmental aspect of the environmental social governance in the company for North America. So that's very much where a lot of the energy management fits in. But realistically, in my role, energy management kind of touches all of the different portfolios that I'm responsible for, everything from HVAC right through to projection and sound, which people don't realize how much energy actually goes into getting that image on the screen and sounding good and a good experience in the auditoriums.
Right. Great. So the project we're going to focus on today is on Landmark's push to replace xenon bulb projectors with laser projectors. And can you tell us a bit about this technology and how that opportunity was originally identified?
Sure. So going way back, everyone thinks of movie theaters with film. Film projectors kind of went out about 15 years ago when the digital revolution really started to take hold. And traditional digital projectors use very high powered xenon bulbs as the light source. So the light source is what allows you to project the image onto the screen. And those xenon bulbs produce a lot of heat, consume a lot of energy, and also represent challenges for safe environmental handling. So they need to be recycled, they need to be handled properly. They have rare earth metals and some heavy metals in them that require special handling on disposal. They can't just be thrown in the garbage, like similar to compact fluorescent bulbs. So about 4.5 years ago, Landmark Cinemas began looking at laser projectors for a project where we were creating a new premium large format experience in our theaters. So premium large format is the largest screens with the best image, best sound we can possibly put in. Probably the most well-known PLF experience is IMAX. We do have IMAX screens, but this PLF was an internal design called Laser Ultra. So the project kind of grew out of the Laser Ultra project. So originally we were investigating the laser projectors for a better on-screen experience. So higher contrast picture, better resolution, deeper darks and deeper colors, blacker blacks and whiter whites than you could generate with a traditional xenon bulb. And it worked great. We installed the projectors with Dolby Atmos sound in the auditoriums. Our customers immediately bought into the experience and really embraced it. So from a financial standpoint, it did everything we wanted it to do. And then we started to notice we no longer had the cost of xenon bulbs to deal with, or the cost of disposing of xenon bulbs. Great
Right.
plus.
So this started off as just sort of like, all right, we're going to do this in a small number of theaters,
Yeah,
like for our premium ones. But then, like, I think you mentioned during the awards that this is turned into a rollout across Canada. So,
yeah.
so what happened during that initial rollout that sort of changed that approach? Or think
So
there was a bigger opportunity?
what we very quickly realized was the laser projectors consume, depending on the size of a projector, and for the large format ones, about 40% less electricity to run. And in a theater, the projectors are actually the largest electricity load. Most commercial buildings, they would be the HVAC, but the for us, the projectors actually exceed the HVAC in load. So a 40% reduction in load became very appealing. So as we started crunching the numbers, and you had the environmental aspect of no bulbs, the cost advantage of no bulbs, the laser projectors represent less maintenance. And then, oh yeah, by the way, we can reduce our energy consumption on 45% of our total energy by another 40%. So an overall reduction of 16% across the line. The economics and environmental impact of the project became super appealing. So what started out as a project to look at kind of 15 large format theaters has now taken us to the point where currently in Canada, across our circuit, 70% of our projection has now been converted to lasers. A large number of our locations are 100% laser projection now. And the overall impact has been staggering. It's reduced our overall energy consumption across the country by about 10%. Just that one rollout project. So
Wow.
what started out as a very limited project that wasn't even energy focused,
Yeah.
it was experiential focused, became what has now become a cornerstone of our energy management program.
That's incredible. And you mentioned like you said like that initial project wasn't even energy focused. But like the data just made so much sense for it, the rollout. But like how did you get that data? Was collecting that data around energy, the maintenance costs, all that part of the original project plan, even though it wasn't really an energy project, or how did you go about getting that
So
evidence?
so we really in earnest started our energy management journey about 6 years ago in 2019. So we were actively tracking our energy consumption very heavily at a lot of locations. We were doing some more traditional, smaller type projects, LED retrofits, lighting controls, um, some limited building automation at the time, VFDs on HVAC, things like that. So we were actively tracking that. But then we saw a greater reduction that couldn't be attributed to the things that we had originally put into the theater and were tracking after putting in a laser ultra screen in a location. So that's what kind of started to open our eyes to, okay, we've got something bigger here that wasn't really part of the original project scope, but is very impactful. And then we start crunching numbers and working with our counterparts in Europe and putting together a rollout plan. And when you start looking at the numbers and you no longer have bulbs and you no longer have all this energy consumption, and then, by the way, there's all kinds of fantastic grants out there, um, whether it's through Save on Energy or if you're a company that works across Canada, there were grants in other provinces as well that allowed us to accelerate it even more, um, and do more projectors than we had originally anticipated. So all of those things kind of came together to give us kind of the perfect storm to really build on a project that wasn't energy focused at first and became very energy focused and payback focused in the end.
Okay. Okay. So it was a big enough change that you were able to see it just at the
Yeah,
facility
yeah.
level. So
So
like did it
so
involve any sub metering to zero in on that more or
it was pretty simple to
okay.
figure out. It was the projector because that was the only thing that had changed. Um, so and a 40% reduction on those large projectors is very impactful. Like you can definitely
Right.
see it move the needle. It's not something that was not noticeable.
Right. And then once you started seeing those results in there, like you said, okay, we should do this everywhere just because it makes sense. Were there any challenges in getting support for that broader rollout, for really doing that acceleration?
So fortunately for us, not really, because this project checked a lot of boxes for the company. It improves customer experience. It gives us a better product. It's in alignment with all of our global ESG goals because we're an SBTI committed company. So for those of you who aren't familiar with SBTI, it's the Science Based Targets Initiative, and it's a goal to be net zero carbon by 2035. Uh, Globally, there is a lot of companies that have signed on and are aligned to that, and we're one of those companies that's committed to that. So this helps with that goal. It helped with budgetary goals. It helped with financial goals. So
Mm,
this one was a really easy thing
right.
for us to build on. And to be honest, we'd already had some limited successes with energy management that kind of laid some of the groundwork to help with people understanding the benefits, especially the financial benefits of doing projects like this.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned, we started out slow. We were crawling, doing small LED retrofits and throwing on
Right.
some VFDs onto some older HVAC units to make them more efficient. So it it's really because of how we started, it became easier and easier for us to pitch projects like this and for people at the senior most levels to really understand what we're trying to do.
Right. And I see that as that's kind of the perfect trifecta, right? You're aligned
Yep.
with the organization's priorities in terms of customer experience, existing goals that they've committed to with the ESG stuff, and it's hitting the bottom line.
Yeah.
But beyond, like, other than the top, was there any resistance or concerns from like departments in the organization of like,
Uh,
bringing in new technology
a
or making changes?
100%. There was a lot of change management with this. The theater industry isn't something that evolves super quickly. Uh, it's an industry where people who come into the industry stay in it for a very long time. Like a lot of our senior level leadership on the operations side, or you know, started as assistant managers in theaters and have just progressed for 20 years and are now in senior leadership roles. So trying to change something with people who are used to doing things a certain way for 20 years takes a lot of education and convincing that this is the right thing to do and it's going to improve your life. And with that, in this project in particular, there's a lot of safety concerns. So when you're using the level of lasers we use in the projectors, there's a lot of safety concerns, because these lasers can do damage to your eyes. They're powerful enough that they can actually cause skin issues if your hand is right in front of a lens. So we had to take the time to do a lot of education and training As we installed projectors, members of my team went out to sites to educate the sites on, okay, here are the differences between your traditional projector and this new laser projector. Here are the safety aspects that you need to be aware of. We now have a laser safety officer that is responsible for laser safety across the company. We've had to make changes in auditoriums where, some of these auditoriums weren't designed with a laser projector in mind, and there's a specific zone where people can't be within the cone, which is the light image coming out of the projector. So we've had to install barriers in back rows and things like that to prevent customers and keep customers safe. So there was a lot of change management that went along with this, and a lot of education. And we were very careful about how we rolled this out, and wanted to make sure we did it in a safe and effective way, and make sure we were taking the time to educate people at the theater level so they understood the differences, and even people in the senior levels that were used to things being a specific way for 20 years, and now it's very different up in our booths.
And that must have been, like you mentioned, there was a lot of change management, but that must have been huge. Like bringing like a commercial facility, all of a sudden bringing in what is essentially like an industrial type piece of equipment with, those kind of safety protocols that are much more common maybe in industrial facilities, but really aren't in those commercial facilities. That must have been quite the change to get the buy-in of like, hey, this is
Yeah,
going to be okay, and there isn't going to be an issue if we roll this out.
yeah, and to be honest, we're still going through some of the change management right now. So something that just recently came up, we haven't been showing a lot of 3D film. There haven't been a lot of good 3D films recently. And when we shift to 3D, there's a screen that has to move in front of the lens that flickers to create the 3D effect on screen. It's alternating the images, so right side, left side. Complicated optics we don't need to get into. But that screen has to move, and traditionally, in most of our locations, it's automated. It's on a gantry system, and it just moves. Well, recently we had an issue at one of our locations where the gantry is not working, and the screen had to be manually moved into place. And normally you would say, okay, we need to lock the projector out, shut it down, make sure it's safe so that we can move this screen into place because the person's breaking the laser safety zone. Unfortunately, between shows, a projector takes a certain amount of time to boot back up, start up, warm up, be ready to go. We don't have that amount of time between, an early matinee and when it gets out and when the late matinee starts, or, late matinee to evenings. There's just not enough time to shut that projector off and start it again. So we have to move it in place with the projector on. Okay, it doesn't sound like a big deal. The person's there, they can, have control, they can make sure there's no image coming out. But all of our projectors also have a theater management system that can start them remotely. So the person doesn't have care and control of that projector. And it's something we never even thought of. And so now we're currently doing job safety analysis and coming up with the proper PPE so that if one of those gantries isn't functioning and you have to move it manually, there's a safe way to do it.
Right?
So we're still learning and
Yeah.
evolving and rolling it out, even though we now have 70% of our projectors already converted. So you can't think of everything, but you can do your best
Yeah.
um, to do as much as you can.
Going back to the start of the rollout, like I'm not that familiar with the projector theater technologies. Is it sort of like, well, there's just this one, or were there different projectors or different
Oh,
approaches to the retrofits that you had to
so
consider between them?
so so we've taken a bunch of different approaches. So we had some projectors that are newer generation projectors, xenon, that we were able to put laser conversion kits in. So basically, you take the guts out, the light, it's called the light box. You remove that, you install a new laser light source, and it becomes a laser projector. It works just like any other laser projector. So we were fortunate, a good number of our projectors were new enough, we were able to do that. We buy projectors from two major manufacturers, Barco and Christie. Both of their projectors are similar but different, of course. So we're installing both of those. And projectors come in a whole plethora of sizes depending on the screen. So you have 35,000 lumen projectors all the way down to 10,000 lumen projectors, and they're all different. So we've installed all the different sizes, the multiple brands, and taken multiple approaches where we've retrofitted or put new ones in. So, it's been a combination of a lot of different strategies to get to where we are. We've been very open minded and we evaluate each one on its merits and the financials and the energy savings and what we can do and pick the best road to go. Now we're pretty much exclusively doing replacements, just because of the age of the fleet and we did all of the ones that were viable already to retrofit. So, and now we're getting to the point where some of the ones we did early in the process 4 years ago that we retrofitted, that we're starting to look at, it's getting close to time for replacement. So it's a constant evolution right now and a lot of different approaches.
Okay, so a lot of different considerations into what
Yeah.
projector goes into a particular theater there. Um, Again, thinking back at the beginning, like you mentioned, like those safety concerns are such a big thing. What was that like getting like at the beginning of the rollout and planning for that? Like you mentioned, there's a lot of change management involved, but sort of what was your approach to preparing for that kind of rollout?
So for me, it was a little different because I came from an industrial background, but the initial response, I think, for a lot of people in the company was fear because it was, what do you mean there's a zone you can't walk into and that this can do damage and things like that. So we had to get people over that hurdle first, that, there's nothing to be afraid of. We're going to do the right things. We're going to put the right safety measures in place. There was an education portion. So I sent 4 members of my team to get laser certified. So they all have laser projection certifications on multiple brands. So Barco and Christie. So we started out by educating our technical team first. And then from there, as we did installs, we did on-site point of use training with all of the different theater people that need to manage this on a day-to-day basis. So we took a very methodological approach where we kind of train the trainer, right? We built the knowledge in the technical group and then disseminated that down to the 35 locations across Canada.
Well, that's quite the process, and you had to build that whole process up from scratch in here.
I mean, we were
Like how?
fortunate. Our European colleagues had some of the work because they did the first installs in Europe. So
Okay.
we're a global company. We have locations in the United States, Europe, and Canada, under various brands. So we were fortunate. Our European colleagues had done some of the work for us that we could reapply. Of course, none of it was in English, so it had to all be translated and you know, kind of put the Canadian stamp on it so that it complied with all the Canadian regulations. But it gave us a bit of a head start because it wasn't, starting from zero. We were
Mhm.
we had a rolling start. It was NASCAR, not F1.
Right, right. So once you had that in place, you sent it out there. Did the training sort of roll out or evolve over time as well, or did it
I'd
got to
say
get
the
out to everyone
training
at
the,
once?
the training's definitely evolved over time. Like there've been things that my guys have learned as they've been out in the field. There have been things we've learned as we've delivered the training. We're much better at anticipating now the kind of questions we're going to get and the kind of concerns we're going to get. So, you know, the first install was large scale install was at our Regina Theater in Saskatchewan in 2019. That was our first building that was 100% laser projection. We built that building with all laser projectors. So that was kind of the spot where we learned the most in that rollout and the differences and what we needed to do. But, we've modified our PM programs with things we've learned. Like we don't need to service these projectors as often as you do with a Xenon one. Um, We've learned things about HVAC because as we've installed the projectors, they don't generate as much heat. And now we don't need to size HVAC on the levels we used to. When we're doing new construction, and we've also been able to remove HVAC from some of our booths because we no longer need the ventilation to each projector. There's been a lot of things we've learned, and we continue to learn
Yeah.
throughout this program.
And with that, there being such a sticking point around that safety or the fears around it, how did you make sure that like that training and the messaging and all that was sticking and that people were going to be following safety protocols?
Um, well, I have to give that one over to our ops team. They've been very supportive with it and embracing it, and our directors of operations across the country. And then I also have to tip my hat to my team. So I have some very talented managers that work for me, and they've traveled to all of the sites. We do annual audits at every site as a compliance portion, and part of that audit is addressing laser safety and then also xenon safety, which is very different. But um, they go through, they observe what's going on, they make sure there's no gaps on an annualized basis so that we know the training we gave last year is still there, or if we need to retrain, we make arrangements to retrain while they're there doing the audit. So
Mm,
we've got a number of catch points we've put in place that allow us to ensure that everything's rolled out working the way we want it to, that you know the theaters are trained. We also have an online training system, a learning management system that has a laser safety module in it, and all theater managers are required to complete that annually and do a test, a knowledge test to show that they understand it. So that's all been built into the program, and you have all of those checkpoints to know that okay, they've all completed their training and passed the course. uh, my senior manager projection and sound has gone to site and done an audit this year, and nothing came up on the audit, or there are gaps on the audit, and we had to put countermeasures in place to correct them.
right.
So, um, there's a lot that goes into managing a program like this and making sure it's working. And then we also have monthly energy management meetings with a consultant group that we work with called Catalyst, where we look at consumption at all the buildings, if there's any blips or deviations, so that we also know that all of the work we've done is doing what it's supposed to and save
Hmm.
energy and save money.
And we've got a question from Jamie about how long was it from, that initial pilot installation of the laser projectors to realizing that this should be a broader across the board project?
So I'd say it was about a 12-month period overall. So the first rollouts were focused largely on PLFs, and then we did Regina. Saw a lot of advantages in Regina, and not far behind Regina, we built a location in Tamarack that was also 100% laser. And then another location in Market Mall in Calgary. And then from there, it kind of exploded. So in 20 late 2020, there was a grant that was made available from the federal government that allowed us to do um, 65 projectors in 1 year. And from there, it was just exponential because we were starting to see all kinds of benefits at that point. So there were some things that were fortuitous, like the grants from Save on Energy from the federal government that allowed us to accelerate things. But it was about a 12-month period from when we, you know, did the initial projects of putting in laser ultras to a widespread laser retrofit program.
And when it came to that, like the implementation, that rollout, you know, like I really kind of see this as okay, there's some like heavy duty industrial equipment coming in. In industrial facilities, a lot of times they have a lot of engineering, process engineers, that sort of stuff on staff to help with it. I assume in like these theaters, that's maybe not the case.
No. So
There's maybe not that same in-house expertise. Like, did that pose any logistical challenges with it?
um well we have a number of really good partners. So all of the installs were completed by a company called Project Tech. They're our primary partner for projection and sound service. They've got some really talented people, so they do have technical people,
Mm,
which we're coming in and supporting. And then outside of that, my group is, we're a very lean group. There's currently 8 of us, and we're pretty much the extent of the technical group.
mm,
We have managers who are called experience managers in the theaters, but their knowledge is very limited, and their primary focus is operational. It's not technical.
mhm. Okay, so it was a lot of coordination between
Yeah,
these different groups, these different
yeah,
specialized skill sets.
yeah. So, I mean, for us, our industry is really lean. So we take an approach of we can't possibly employ every skill set we would need for a project like this. So we bring consultants in like Catalyst, like Project Tech to supplement on a short-term basis. So we pay for labor when we need the labor. We don't pay salary and overhead just to have an electrical engineer on staff.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
so it's a kind of a just-in-time labor approach, right? We bring the appropriate consultants in. And some people say, "Oh my gosh, consultants are so expensive," but in the long run, they really aren't because you're using them for when you need them, and you're paying for that specific point in time. And then when you don't need that support anymore, you no longer have the overhead. So, partners like Catalyst, partners like Project Tech have been critical to our success in our energy management programs.
Right. Were there any other challenges that came up during the rollout once you started putting these in the theaters?
Yeah, it worked so well. Everyone wanted more of them. So, I mean, again, this year we're doing another 40 installs. Um, co Most recently, the biggest challenge that we ran into where ironically something totally out of our control. Sure, the tariffs from the that our friends south of the border were starting, stopping, starting again. It caused a lot of supply chain issues. So we had a rollout plan of 38 projectors this year. We ordered them in January, and we're installing the last one tomorrow. Um, because of all the supply chain issues with the tariffs. And Christie, our primary partner, had to relocate their manufacturing um, locations into Canada. It's been really complicated, and that really affected a lot of our plans this year because we couldn't do things when we wanted to do them. We were able to do them when projectors were able to deliver. Um, and so, you have to be nimble on your feet and change your plans and adapt and do what you can. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was. I mean, that's probably been the biggest hiccup that we've had lately was just the tariffs and what it did to the supply chain. And
Right.
then obviously, COVID was a big challenge for our entire organization in a number of ways, which also, limited travel and things like that. So we had to adapt to doing remote training and talking people
Mm,
through on Zoom calls and on Teams calls, and doing training not live and in person, which was also, a challenge for us to adapt to. But like the rest of the world, we did.
right.
And we did what
And,
we had to.
and in terms of like the physical install, is it a pretty easy like swap in, swap out, or were there any challenges like with the building space or anything like
For,
that?
for the most part, it's a pretty easy swap in, swap out. Um, there have been some challenges. One of the biggest ones was we recently, in partnership with IMAX, converted our IMAX projectors from high powered xenon to lasers. And we have the most IMAX laser projection in Canada right now. And those projectors are massive.
Mm,
I mean, massive. So we actually had to, in the case of one location, knock a wall down and open it up to be able to get the new projector into the booth. So there have been logistic challenges with some of it, but we have a good team and we have good people in our construction group, and we're able to overcome those, and we've worked through them, and for the most part, it's gone relatively smoothly.
And that seems like just the scale of it, and like you said, there's a lot of the stuff that's outside of your control. It seems like quite the undertaking. How did you like approach or plan that rollout? Like you said, you've had exponential growth and like how fast this is going out. How do you kind of manage that side of it?
So it's kind of been a multi-pronged approach. So the company as a whole has a goal by 2028. We want to be 100% laser across all regions, all locations. So, and obviously there's a finite amount of money. We don't have an unlimited pocketbook. So every year we get allotted a certain amount of capital. We look at the priorities for that capital and say, okay, we can spend X dollars on projectors this year. The second thing we look at is what grants are available, because these projects do carry a lot of great environmental and energy benefits. So we'll evaluate which grants we can get, and that helps us make the decision of where we're going to install projectors. And then from there, we work at plan out and work with our supply partners and Christie and Barco and on when projectors can deliver, pull together a schedule, and work with Project Tech to schedule the labor. So it's a multi-level kind of approach. And like I said, we're going to do another 40 this year.
Excellent. And what kind of results have you been seeing so far?
Feedback from the patrons is incredible. Um, they noticed. I don't think they know what the difference is, but they just know our picture's better than our competitor, and it looks better on screen. Um, Operationally, I mean, the laser projecting is part of our overall strategy. Since 2018, we've reduced our overall energy consumption in the company by 34%, company wide. Laser projection plays a major role in that. So, from that standpoint, super happy, well ahead of our SBTI goals. And then economically, we've saved a lot of money operationally, a lot of time. And we also don't have to deal with the environmental aspect of disposing of bulbs like we used to. Um, so everything has really moved in the right direction. The results have been fantastic. But I think the thing that this has really opened the doors on is future projects. So because we've had such success with this project and our overall energy management program to date, this helped unlock doors for us to do building automation and more advanced building automation where now we do outside air temperature offsets. We adjust HVAC based on occupancy and based on number of patrons. We've got our ticketing system communicating with our building automation. We installed a new theater management system that allows us to shut projectors off when there's zero attendance in auditoriums if we don't sell any tickets. Um, all of those programs have been much easier sells because of the success of the laser program. And then probably the biggest one is 3 weeks ago, we broke ground on our first generation project. So we are installing wind and solar generation on our Waterloo site as part of our overall electrification strategy. So we've got a 260 kilowatt solar array and 80 kilowatt wind array of small micro wind turbines going up on the roof there. And I'm not sure we would have elected to do that without the success of our
Right.
previous energy management programs like the laser retrofit.
Right. Because like this laser one, like I mentioned earlier, it's that like perfect trifecta. It's like aligned
Yeah,
with the priorities and goals and all this sort of stuff. But you're saying like the success of that, what looked like a very obvious home run project has made it easier for these other projects that maybe don't have that same trifecta alignment, and may have struggled for approval before, but now because people have seen the success there, like those are moving forward easier.
yeah. I mean, just in general, the embrace of some of the ESG type projects is much more
Mm.
prevalent because of the success of past ones. The other thing that this has kind of opened our eyes to is some of the grants, like the Save on Energy performance program where, we're able to get grants based on the number of kilowatts we save, which has also opened our eyes to other grants, like what we're doing with the wind and solar. So it's been a lot of things where there's laser program's been a jumping off point to
Right.
bigger and better things within the overall energy management
Right.
portfolio.
Like the kind of chain reaction sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a question from Nick, and it's sort of about like I know, when we install an air compressor or things like that, you install it and it's like, oh, it's more efficient. But then there's also, commissioning it and making it run efficiently and not when needed. Is that similar? Like he specifically asked, like, is there an opportunity? Like, do they always run at maximum brightness? Or is there
No,
an opportunity to adjust that depending on, like, to save more energy? Like, can these systems, like, you install it, you're saving 40% energy, but can they be, like, tweaked operationally as well for more savings?
100%. So you adjust. So the lasers have adjustable output from 0 all the way up to 100%. We have a minimum standard of how many foot candles we want the image to be for brightness, depending on whether it's a 2D image or a 3D image. Um, so when we install a laser projector, the intent is it should not be running at 100% output when it's first installed. The target is around 70%, but most of ours are running actually lower than that, as we've installed them. Now, as a laser ages, its output changes, so you have to slowly increase it. um, and when you hit 90%, it's basically time to change the laser. So we're every year we do a PM on all of the different laser projectors and check the light levels on screen, fine tune the output of the laser to maintain the light levels on screen, always trying to minimize what the laser output is to get that image on screen.
Okay. So there is those tweaks that can
Yeah.
happen within that. Um, I'm sorry, I'm not sure, Mr. But did you say like what was the general payback of these, or are you able to kind of share that
So
level, like that made it
yeah.
such a home
So
run?
so our standard target for internal rate of return on any project's 15%. Um, all of these projects were way more than that. Um, so some of the larger projectors were the biggest savings because the bulbs for those projectors cost a lot more, and obviously they're consuming a lot more energy. So some of those were as high as 50% internal rate of return. Some of the smaller projectors are stretching out a little longer, but all of them are paying back in 5 years or less.
Hmm. Oh, that's great. Um, and this ended up turning from, a small few screen project into this really ambitious rollout. What do you see as some of the key success factors that allowed that to happen?
Um, First and foremost, it's the guys on my team. Um, they're really talented individuals, super dedicated, really bright and smart guys. Um, so without them, this program would have never have happened, especially not at the speed and with the excellence that it happened. Um, the support we got from Catalyst in getting the grant money and helping us to track the energy savings and understand it, without those guys and their capabilities and some of their guidance, this stuff wouldn't have happened. And then honestly, it's been a top down all the way from our CEO right down to the theater level. Everyone got behind it and is bought into it. And, you know, ultimately the biggest thing that's made this a success has been the consumer response. Um, we track our fixed seat occupancy. So the percentage of time that a seat in an auditorium is occupied. And on average, our laser ultra screens, which are the ones that are branded as lasers, so that's the one that the consumer most associates with laser,
Hmm.
have our highest occupancies, usually about 15 to 20% higher than the rest of the theaters in a complex. So we're getting great customer response and embrace of the brand and the concept of laser on screen. We've got good financials, but none of that happens without my team, without their dedication and all the work they've done.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's in throughout here, like you mentioned, data on the maintenance stuff and having the data on the attendance numbers to show that and the energy savings and it seems like that like
Yeah, we're
it's impressive, particularly like a small company. Like a lot of companies kind of struggle uh, with some of that of like collecting the data to support business cases and prove those savings. But it seems like your team, like you're very on top of that side of it.
yeah, we're as an organization, we're a pretty data-driven organization. And, while we're a, medium-sized company in Canada, globally, we're a large company. Um, so we do have some resources out of Europe that help support us. But um, we also know what we don't know. And that's where, we're willing to spend the money on consultants to help support us and do data analysis and, give us guidance and help us with some of those technical things. We've got a great controlling group that does all of this data management, but we also have a lot of automated data management in our ticketing systems and our building automation now and our theater management systems that give us all of this feedback. And it's technology we've chose to invest in, and the reason we've chose to invest in it is because it helps us make decisions and helps us guide where we spend our time and our money and our effort.
Right. And you mentioned like you're even getting into some generation projects, but what's sort of next on deck for your team in terms of looking for those energy savings, looking to achieve those ESG goals and the SBTI goals?
So two kind of really big projects we're working on. So the prototype generation project, which we're currently in construction on. The hope is that's going to prove out the way we anticipate it is, and it's going to basically take the Waterloo location to net zero. Um, we'll still be connected to the grid, but we're going to be close to generating all the power we need in that building. And then replicating that across the country, especially right now, because there's some great solar grants throughout the country and tax breaks for it. So that's kind of one of our big pillars. The other one is we're starting our electrification journey right now. And we're looking at a very large refresh of over 100 HVAC units across the country, taking them from traditional gas fire to either heat pumps or dual fuel heat pumps for better efficiency. And then also, the green aspects of not having to burn fossil fuels to heat our buildings. So those are kind of our two largest projects, but we're still going to be continuing to roll out better building automation, better theater management systems. We've got 14 sites. We're installing new theater management systems next year, which, automate lights, automate projectors, automate scheduling, automate all of that. Um, so there's a lot of different things we're doing, and we've been fortunate. What we've chose to do so far has given us a really strong base and some success. That's now allowing us to do some cool and fun things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We have a question from Ian, and you mentioned that like the projectors are the largest electricity consumer in your facilities,
Yep.
and you had a question of like what kind of wattages are you talking about here before after? I imagine it would vary by size, like screen
Yep.
size on there. Is that like I don't is that details you're able to discuss?
Yeah. So I mean, a standard xenon bulb is going to be upwards of 3,000 watts. Um, and you're reducing that by a minimum of 20%, likely closer to 40 to 50% with the laser output. But that's only a portion of the savings. You have a tremendous heat sink with the xenon bulbs, they produce a lot of heat. What we're seeing post laser is we used to have a minimum 5 horsepower exhaust fan on every single projector. Those don't exist anymore. So you're eliminating all of those exhaust fans. So in a location like Waterloo with 10 screens, that's 50 horsepower in exhaust fans that no longer run. And then we're seeing our HVAC loading move from about an 80% load ratio, like it's on 80% of the time in the summer, down to about 50.
Oh, wow.
Uh, um, so it's kind of the cascade of, yeah, there's a huge wattage savings right at the projector. But the reason the projectors are our largest energy sink is all of the other systems that have to support those projectors because of the
Right.
heat they generate. So,
And with that, that's a pretty significant impact on the HVAC side. Is that now coming into play when you're looking to upgrade the HVAC units in terms of
a
resizing them, or?
100% as we're now looking at a lot of that, we're having to resize HVAC, make changes, especially with our booths. A couple of years ago, our two largest sites, we actually reduced 280 tons of cooling at them overall. So our Whitby and Canada sites are our two largest in Canada, and with an HVAC upgrade, we cut the cooling in half in those buildings. And some of that's due to what we're saving in the laser projection.
Right. Wow. Wow. Ian had a follow-up question about, with that big change in demand of the projector and the HVAC, is like, are you seeing a lot of demand saving, like not just energy consumption on that, but are you getting
Yeah,
demand savings on your bill as well?
we are. So we do see a pretty consistent reduction. So an average site like Waterloo probably pre-laser was around 200 kilowatt demand. Now Waterloo consistently runs at about 140 during prime operating hours. So we're seeing pretty substantial savings on the demand portion of the bills.
Well, that's impressive. All right. Uh, so I think that wraps up the questions. Tony, is there anything else that you want to share about these projects? I think
No,
we covered a
no, I
lot, but
I think we've covered a lot, and I just wanted to thank everyone for listening to me for the last 50 minutes.
yeah.
I appreciate everybody's time today. I hope you learned something or at least found it entertaining.
Yeah,
Um,
I find this like a really interesting, a really exciting project, all those different components and the change management side and something that, we're all familiar with going to the theaters, but maybe thinking about it in a different way now. So thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your time and information about this project. And thanks for everyone for joining us here today as well. Um, if anyone is actually, first of all, I do encourage everyone keep the conversation going. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. If you have any questions that you think of afterwards, we do have a online discussion forum that you can join through the energy management community. So you can questions to peers, questions to energy coaches, any of that. Nicole dropped a link to register for that in the chat. Um, and then also, if you have an interesting project or experience that you'd like to share with the community, please let us know. You can reach out to me at j@goldfin.ca. And this kind of peer learning, I find it so valuable. We're always looking for energy managers to share what they've been working on. And when thinking about whether you have something to share, please keep in mind that we have energy managers in organizations at all stages of this journey, wide range of experience and sophistication. So it doesn't need to be super innovative, state of the art project. We love sharing all kinds of successes, big and small. And including that, Save on Energy has a podcast, the Energy Manager's Playbook, where we share some of those stories from the energy management community. Season one was a great success. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. Nicole dropped a link in the chat. And we are now in the process of developing season two of the Energy Manager's Playbook. So if you have successes or experiences that you'd like to share with the community, please reach out to us. I'll put my email in the chat there, but we love sharing these stories. Okay, yeah. Nicole's dropped that in there. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you again, Tony, and we look forward to seeing everyone next time. Stop sharing. And the event. Okay, so I think